Welcome to the Au Jus. I'm your host, Kirsten Ramos, otherwise known as Mrs. BeefLoaf. This show is being sponsored by our friends at Punky's Pizza and Pasta, located at 2600 South Wallace, my personal favorite eatery in the neighborhood. They have the best selection of pizzas and pastas, as well as sandwiches and salads of any spot in Bridgeport. Currently, they have what they're calling the Pizza Happy Hour, Mondays and Tuesdays only, between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. You order a pizza from Punky's and you get 50% off. Yes, you heard that correctly. 50% off of pizzas ordered Mondays and Tuesdays between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. How in the world can you get 50% off the best pizza in Bridgeport? The Pizza Happy Hour. Hit the website at punkyspizza.com. For all your carryout, delivery, and catering needs, you can also call them at 312-842-2100. The Scarlotta family will take care of you. Punky's Pizza and Pasta. This show is also powered by you, the loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to the gentleman's YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, and turn on notifications, and most definitely super chat, because that's how those guys get paid and keep making the brand new content that you enjoy and love. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be guest hosting today. I am really excited about this conversation because today I am joined by Christine Brennan, an award-winning national sports columnist for USA Today, a commentator for CNN, ABC News, PBS NewsHour, and NPR, a best-selling author and nationally known speaker. Hello and welcome, Christine. I'm so excited to have you.
Well, I'm excited to be here, Kirsten. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Today we'll talk a little bit of White Sox, a very short amount. I also want to get into your new book that is coming out July 8th, titled On Her Game, Caitlin Clark and the Revolution in Women's Sports, and also a little bit about women's sportscasting and the coverage of women's sports in general. So let's kick this off by talking about the White Sox. You have a family history of the White Sox within your lineage, even though you were born and raised in Toledo. And you had the opportunity to cover the 2005 White Sox World Series run. I would love to hear anything that you remember from that time, even if it's some fiercely loyal fan interactions that you had during that time.
Well, obviously, I didn't realize that the future Pope was in the audience in the stands.
Right.
Yeah, I know. I've covered a lot of baseball over the years, although I've covered more football and obviously Olympic sports and women's sports and what have you too. But that World Series was special for me because I did grow up as a White Sox fan because my mom and dad were from the South Side. So my mom went to South Shore High School. She was class of 46. And my dad was Hyde Park High School, class of 44. And he was a football player and a shot putter. And he was so good as a football player, he actually had a scholarship to Drake University in Des Moines. And so anyway, my parents were from the South Side after they got married there. And then, in fact, my mom was pregnant with me when they moved to Toledo. My dad had a business opportunity there. And I was born and raised in Toledo, as were my three other siblings. But we always went to Chicago, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and during the summer to see our grandparents, to see our cousins and aunts and uncles. And because everyone was on the South Side, especially our grandparents when they were still alive, my dad would always take us to a White Sox game at Old Comiskey.
Yes.
And I can remember the blue seats, and I have the ticket stubs that are in my scrapbook. I should have pulled it out so I could wave them around. But like we're talking 1968, 1969, these would be the hitless wonder years of the White Sox with the great pitching, Joe Horlin and Gary Peters, and obviously not the great hitting. But and then a few years, then you've got Bill Melton coming along. And you've got Carlos May, and there's, of course, others, many others. I will say this, I had baseball cards were such a big part of with all of us, and we'd go to the drugstore and buy the pack, and then you get that really hard pink gum, and you buy more.
It has like 2 seconds worth of flavor before you have to
Totally.
spit it out. Yep.
Well, if you could even get it to congeal, because it's like this
So
brick.
true.
Anyway, I got a Pete Ward card relatively quickly, as at like 10, 11 years old, whatever. And my friend David Hansen, who was my best friend and was huge, also Chicago fan, even though we're in Toledo, his mother was from the North Shore. So anyway, like Pete Ward, for some reason, I was just like fascinated by Pete Ward. He was one of my favorites. And I got a chance to talk to him on the phone. He's passed away now, but years later, and just tell him how amazing and email him and whatever, how amazing he was and what he meant to me. I don't know why it was Pete Ward, but I just thought his name was cool. He was a great player. But those White Sox teams were decent, but those were the Detroit Tigers, who we also kept an eye on because of Toledo. Got really good there in the late 60s, early 70s. But still, yes, always going to Sox games. The scoreboard exploding. Of course, Bill Veeck was, that was one of his creations. And everything about that experience, it was just magical to me to be able to go to a baseball game, just to drive or however we got there, and and just be with my dad and my siblings. It was spectacular. It's a great memory to this day.
Yes.
So then ahead, the White Sox, of course, are in the 2005 World Series, as you mentioned. I'm USA Today's national sports columnist, and I covered that series. It was quick, don't blink or you miss it, right? Nope. But I just remember the packed, the new Comiskey, cellular, whatever.
Whatever it was at that time.
Yeah, what's it even called? What's it called now?
It's called Rate Field.
That's it. Yeah. Yep. And how high it was, whatever, but the sound level, because just the noise, the volume, the excitement in the and just the White Sox just on top of their game, and those magical moments. Then went to Houston, and you're watching them jump around, and they've won the series, and I couldn't help but think of my dad, who had passed away a year and a half, 2 years earlier, and how cool that was. In fact, my sister texted like, how much would Dad and Mom be loving this? And so yeah, it meant a lot, and I enjoyed doing that very much. And to see the Sox and the uniforms, everything about the White Sox, it was terrific. So lots of great memories, and I know you guys will get back to winning ways soon. You have to, right? It has to happen, right?
I will say, at least this team seems to be more fun to watch this year. I don't know if the players on the field seem to be having more fun. So at least when we're losing, it's not losing completely ugly. So yes, I appreciate those well wishes coming our way. Christine, let's shift gears a little bit, because you've always been at the forefront of mentoring women in sportscasting. In fact, you created and served as the first president of the Association of Women in Sports Media, where you're currently the board chair. Where do you see the biggest gaps still existing for female sportscasters?
It's certainly better than it was, right? There's so many more women on air, so many more women covering teams for newspapers and news organizations, and columnists, national columnists, women, sports columnists. So it truly is better. And I'm a real optimist. So I'm the glass half full person, not half empty. And compared to, say, my goodness, well, when I'm getting going in the 80s, of course, you didn't have the internet, so you didn't even really know who was out there, right? The idea being that you'd have, these opportunities, few and far between. Obviously, I'd be in press boxes. I started my career at the Miami Herald, and I'd be in press boxes, and I'd be the only woman covering Florida Gators football, Miami Dolphins, maybe one other woman there with me, and out of 100 journalists, 100 sports writers, 80 sports writers, whatever, 50, 60, whatever the number would be, depending on the game. And so now there's so many more. And, I don't know the exact numbers. Our Association of Women in Sports Media, I'm not sure no one's done a survey recently, but it's well over 1,000, probably well over 2,000 when you consider all the women, not only in front of the camera, but behind the camera, producing, camera people,
Yes.
editing. And then, of course, at newspapers like USA Today. So I'm a columnist. Nancy Armour, who's in Chicago, is a columnist for USA Today as well. And then our editor, sports editor, is Roxana Scott, a woman, obviously. And the deputy is Nicole Pale, also a woman. And that's at USA Today. And there are women at major newspapers as sports editors. And so it's true progress. Is it 50-50? No. Is it going to be 50-50 in my lifetime? Nope. Will it be 50-50 in your lifetime? Nope. But the reason for that is not, I'm not just giving up, but it's because obviously the jobs are filled and people keep the jobs. Also in our business, all the cost cutting going on in all of broadcasting and journalism, all media is really tough. And so, it's not like, I think every sports editor in the country would love to hire 5 or 6 new people every day, and have them, a new group coming every year or two and just have a huge staff. Well, you can't because budget constraints. And so, with that in mind, I think that's where we are. But sports editors would definitely, you've got all these women who are coming with Title IX, playing sports, loving sports, this crest of this wave of this demographic wave of girls and women playing sports. A lot of them would like careers in sports. Media is one of them. And at that exact same time that this wave is cresting in our country and our culture, the bottom is falling out of the journalism business. And so I think it's not sexism or misogyny. I know some people want to look and say that.
Sure.
I'm sure there's some of that, of course, but I think it's also just the opportunity to hire some of these great young women and great young men too. They're not getting the jobs because the jobs don't exist anymore.
Right.
And that is a problem. But even so, I am optimistic and it is much better. And I think women are treated better. I also think people act professionally. And, I want men and women, you're not fans, you're covering the team, but you're also not the investigative journalist that someone like me might be. So there's a healthy relationship there that you have, and also to dress professionally and look great. But also, I'm a big believer when I talk to women about this is not a cocktail party. You're dressed for your job, and I say this for guys too. I think be professional. I want that young woman who's 25 or 30 to be doing more TV when she's in her 50s and 60s, like I have done. Well, the only way that's going to happen is if it's, if the substance, if you've got goods and you are able to interview and what you're talking about. And I'm not saying I think many do, but my mentoring is always about wanting the longevity of the careers. And not, shame on any kind of producer out there or boss who thinks somehow that a woman needs to be, attracting, men to the camera. No, she is there to do her job as a journalist or a broadcaster. And I think we got off on the wrong track in this country involving women in sports for a while. And I want these women, again, to be treated correctly and to have long careers and not be 35 and be replaced by the next 25-year-old, right?
Yes.
So,
well, and you're exactly right. We did see a lot of that, and it's hopefully less that we're not seeing and hearing, because now people are more vocal too. Women are more vocal of, I'm being pushed out because of this. So I'm in agreement with you. I'm hoping that it's less of that. And I like the fact that when you mentor those, younger women in media, that you're saying, hey, this is for that longevity of know your stuff. And it's harder to, you're harder to replace, whether that's in any career, knowing what you're doing. So I love that. And when I think about even, sports casting in general and media and the rise of women's sports, we'll talk about your book in just a minute, but I'd love to know, are there any trends in sports media that you're excited about or concerned about, besides the fact that, kind of the jobs may be less, but are there any trends that you're seeing, and especially the way that women's sports are being covered?
Yeah. Well, certainly today's the greatest day in women's sports until tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? You know, the
Right.
coaching, the training, the interest, nutrition, you know, everything about parents caring about their daughters to play sports just like their sons.
Mhm.
That is a huge change in our country. And that's because of Title IX, which, by the way, as we talk today, it's the 53rd anniversary of Title IX today. So there you go.
Excellent.
Happy 53rd birthday, Title IX.
Yes.
Changing the playing fields of America and frankly, changing the country in terms of the
Yes.
mindset that girls and women could play sports. A lot of those girls grow up wanting to have, you know, careers. They're leaders. They learn how to win at a young age. Even more important, they learn how to lose at a young age. Teamwork,
Yes.
physical fitness. I mean, when we have women running for and becoming president of the United States in the 30s and 40s, and also running universities and running Fortune 500 companies, the common denominator for all of those women in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and onward will be that they played sports because of Title IX and learned those life lessons. Not that they became Olympic gold medalists, not that they became college, you know, scholarship athletes, but that they had that experience at age 6, 7, 8, the way their brothers did for generations. Well, now, and boys did for generations. Well, now girls and women have that too. So, I think that's huge. The opportunities. And then we're seeing, of course, the incredible explosion in interest, certainly in one player in particular, who I know we'll talk about in a minute, and one sport, a team sport, finally, because so much of Americans' women's sports interest has been Olympic sports, which tend to be individual. Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, you know, back to track and field, other swimmers over the years, and tennis.
Yes.
Jean King fighting for equal pay at the U.S. Open in 1973. It took a quarter century more for the other 3 Grand Slam tournaments to even begin to talk about equal pay for women. But the U.S. was telling the women in 1973, equal pay to the men. And that's incredible. So tennis and golf, obviously golf has lagged behind tennis, but Serena, Venus, amazing, terrific stories, great athletes, great people, role models, etc. So, you know, we've seen a lot of that. And I think that's a huge change. The internet is not great for anyone. It's a cesspool. We know that. It's certainly worse for women than men, and it is worse for Black people than white people.
Yep.
So a lot of Black women, a lot of women, obviously Black men and white men too. You know, everyone's just trashing everyone on X and social media, and that's terrible. And people do want to attack female athletes who are white or Black. Just terrible. So, you know, the rise of social media, there's a lot of good things about that, as we know. But as we also know, there's some bad things, and it impacts the sports world as well.
Yes.
And then TV, you know, we're seeing more women's sports on TV. The ratings are good. The viewership numbers are good. We need to keep seeing more and more of that, because but already that's changed so dramatically from even years ago.
Yes. Well, on that note, your upcoming book titled Caitlin Clark, On Her Game, Caitlin Clark and the Revolution in Women's Sports. This is highly anticipated. I know you've been making the media circuit rounds, so thank you again for being here today. But what prompted you to write about her story? And then also, how do you see her impact continuing to shape the future of women's sports?
Yeah, well, it's something that I started to watch just from home because I wasn't covering the women's Final Four. I was gearing up to go to the Masters and cover the golf tournament. And so I'm watching it. And I think, like a lot of observers and just people watching in their homes, I was watching Caitlin Clark score 41 points against South Carolina, and Iowa upset South Carolina. And you're kind of like, what am I watching here? What am I seeing?
Yes.
I'd watched a game a few months earlier, Indiana against Iowa, just on my iPad, actually. And again, this last second buzzer beater, she's sideways, she's, you know, throwing the ball up from the parking lot, it goes in, you know, she's running around, and you're like, again, when have we seen a female team sport athlete just electrify crowds like this, get these TV ratings? So one thing led to another. I happened to be in Indianapolis for the Olympic swimming trials a year ago, covering the trials, picking the U.S. team before the Paris Olympics. It was in Indianapolis, inside Lucas Oil Stadium. And so my sports editor asked me to go over and do a couple columns during Fever games because it was 5 blocks away and I was in Indy. If I had not been in Indianapolis, I would not have met Caitlin Clark. And I probably wouldn't be doing a book, but because the trials for swimming were in Indy and I was in Indy, I then went over to the Fever. Funny how life works.
Yeah, really.
And so obviously I've been watching it, I've been seeing it, I've written a few columns about the magnitude of it, the Olympics, and I broke the news that she was not going to be on the Olympic team. And I deal even more with that about that in the book, and with new reporting on that. And then also the charter flights for the players, I broke that story. So I was starting to delve into a little bit of the Caitlin Clark story. But anyway, wrote a couple columns during those games when I went over and left the swimming trials, and got a chance to meet Caitlin Clark, talk to her for a few minutes, and just a nice off the record chat. Yeah. And got back, and I was gearing up for the Paris Olympics, and I'm in DC, and so I, was just kind of talking to a few people and editors. I've written books for Scribner, 3 books, now 4, but it had been a long time, like 18 years since I'd written a book for them. And talking to my editor, one thing leads to another. And they're offering me sight unseen, no book proposal, the opportunity to write a book. They're, giving me an offer to write a book for Scribner on Caitlin Clark. And so that was it. It was kind of serendipity and kind of not planned, definitely not planned, but also just the way life works sometimes. And I was able to just after the Olympics, just immediately go to Indy and, within a couple of days and just be on the road wherever the Fever were. I was in Indy or on the road, and press availabilities with Caitlin Clark and asking her any question. And she's terrific. I mean, she'll answer and go on with her answer and looks you in the eye, never shies away from any topic, even as the weight of the world, racial issues, everything going on her, and the way she handled it. I say in the book, it's like she was 22 going on 40 or 50.
Yeah. And
that's really the way she is. And what you see is it's even better than like all her fans.
Yes.
She really is terrific. And again, for most athletes who I've covered over the years who not wanted to talk or they get upset about a question, nope, she just charges right ahead, is as appreciative of what she has and talking about the importance of being a role model as any athlete I've ever seen. Again, under the microscope and the spotlight that she's had, right? So it's pretty amazing. So that's kind of how it all happened.
Yeah. Well, I just love seeing pictures of her at games where these young girls will come up with their jerseys and with their basketballs, and she takes the time when I'm certain she's probably like, I got to get to the locker room, or I've got to do these things. But she takes the time, and she seems to handle a lot of the criticism that's being thrown her way with a lot of poise. A lot of times I even think she's been too gracious to different media comments or different players' attitudes or actions, where it's just like, oh no, it's just basketball, it's just the game. And it's like, what? How can that just be the game? But it seems like she really is more like, I just need to take this high road here and do what I do best, which is make these amazing shots from practically the half-point line, and be that great teammate for my other team members. Were there any surprising facts that you learned about Caitlin Clark while writing this book that you can share in advance of its release?
Oh, well, thanks. Thanks for putting it that way. And yes, she is incredibly introspective. As you said, totally honest. Like if it's a bad game, or she'll say it, or if she loses her cool, which happens because she gets technical fouls. And I asked her, at one game, she actually hit the stanchion, the basket, the padded, and that's under the part of the basket. And I said, when you're doing that, like, what are you thinking? She said, too much. I'm thinking too much. And we had this back and forth, and she's smiling. I'm sure I was smiling. And, she says, it's just, the way she is, and she's just honest. And she talks about the emotions of the moment.
Yeah.
And she didn't think it was a should have been a technical because she's mad at herself, not mad at anyone else. It wasn't meant to the refs, and anyway, on and on. But she said, but it's a technical, they're going to call it. And then she said, well, I just want to thank the ref because after he called that, he fired us up and we played a lot better, and so she's funny that way. And,
Yeah.
She is totally optimistic. Almost everything she says or does, it ends in a positive way. I mean, even if it's a negative, a loss or whatever, she turns it into a positive. She's got a great knack for that. Looks you in the eye when she asks any, you can ask her anything. Again, 22. I mean, I've dealt with athletes in their 30s get furious with me covering the NFL. Tiger Woods would get, kind of be grumpy and not even want to answer questions. I mean, I can't tell you how different Caitlin Clark is from Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
All the autographs that Caitlin Clark signs, Tiger just kept his head down, didn't want to do any, any autographs, didn't want to talk to people. And, Caitlin will have coattails that Tiger Woods, never will have in golf, because she's bringing a whole generation or two after her. But, I think just a very loyal, very confident, very strong-willed person, believes in herself. The confidence she has at this young age, extraordinary. And the way she just keeps going, no matter what's being thrown at her. A columnist friend of mine in the book, I quote him as saying, she's like the biggest racial wishbone we've ever seen, like Thanksgiving when you're pulling on the wishbone.
Yes.
And yet she just handles it all.
Yeah.
A remarkable person and so great for the WNBA in so many ways, obviously attracting new fans and record TV ratings.
Yes. And record games being shown on TV. I mean, it's wonderful. You turn on the TV and there's a game. It's truly amazing.
It is. And I know there are people out there that are like, maybe not necessarily for us here, but are mad, like, well, why is she getting all the attention? Well, I so wish, as I covered this, and I covered the WNBA back in 1999 for Lifetime TV. I was a sideline reporter and a commentator on TV, written about it, talked about it on CNN, all the issues involving the WNBA. So we've, any of us who covered it, you'd hope that there would be a breakthrough.
Yes.
Didn't happen until now.
Yep.
And it would have been great if it happened.
Absolutely.
Years ago, but it didn't. And so now's the moment. And this is, the league just didn't seem to be ready for the national attention and scrutiny that Caitlin Clark brought along. They had many opportunities. They had many hints that it was happening from what was going on in the Big Ten at Iowa, of course, and your beloved Iowa, and all that. But here it is. And that spotlight that shines on Caitlin Clark also shines, as you were alluding to, on so many other players finally getting the attention that they've deserved for years.
Yes.
Finally getting it.
Yes. Christine, I want to thank you so much for your time, but I also want to tell people within the Chicagoland area where you can meet Christine in person. July 24th, you will be having a book signing event at the Book Stall located in Winnetka. That's at 811 Elm Street in Winnetka on Thursday, July 24th from 6 to 7. Definitely, if you're planning on attending, plan on purchasing the book at the event so that way the local bookstore gets those proceeds. But if you can't attend, go ahead and pre-order the book. It is going to come out on July 8th. Christine, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on.
Kirsten, I've appreciated it as well. And thank you. And for all those fans, I mean, I know for Southsiders, that could be a bit of a haul, especially during rush hour. You can also have a book ordered and I would be happy to sign it. And especially for the girl athlete in your life or the boy athlete, I'll sign as many as we'll be there all night signing if necessary. And then that could even be mailed to you. The bookstore could get it to you. So there's a lot of ways to do it. And thank you for that opportunity to give the shameless plug for the book. But
of course.
And you know what? It's still the middle of this year for the White Sox, but there's always next year too.
That's right. So you're saying there's a chance.
I am. They will make it back. There's the ebb and flow. We see all these teams come and go.
Indeed.
And with the Pope's involvement now,
I mean, we have a direct line to God. So come on.
The sky is the limit. Yes. Thank you, Kirsten. I've really enjoyed it. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you. Next week's guest is Alex Rude, where he and Beef will have an in-depth discussion about the upcoming MLB trade deadline with emphasis on how it could affect the White Sox. Thanks to Punky's Pizza and Pasta and all the 108 family that was up in the YouTube tonight. Appreciate you all and appreciate all your comments. Of course, those drinks and tips and for smashing that like button. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Stay classy, Chicago.